If you're listening to this podcast within a couple of weeks of it being released, it's the new year. And it's a fabulous time to boost your business by growing your mailing list. In this episode of the Heart Centered Business Podcast, I'm going to walk you step by step through one strategy that could help you get 100 people on your mailing list within the next month. We're going to go through it week by week. Plus, I have a fabulous free resource for you. This is episode number 450 of the Heart Centered Business Podcast, which means you can find all the relevant links and the show notes for today's episode over at tashcorbin.com/450. Let's dive in. Hello, I'm Tash Corbin, a business strategist and mentor based on the Sunshine Coast in Australia. The mission of this podcast is to help heart-centered entrepreneurs to make more money, and in doing so, change the world for the better. This podcast was recorded on the lands of the Gubbi Gubbi and Jinnaburra people. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. There are hundreds of different ways that you can be growing your mailing list. I've got one strategy that I love to help people to roll out when they want to start building their mailing list more consistently. This strategy takes 4 to 5 weeks to implement and will get approximately 100 people or more onto your mailing list within that time. Now, it does mean that we're going to have to do some good, strong foundational work, but I'm sure you're up for the challenge. Let's dive into the strategy step by step. So step number 1 is we've got to be clear on who and why. Who do you want specifically to attract to your mailing list, and why is it valuable for them to be on it? This is often something that is overlooked when it comes to mailing list growth. People are so focused on why it's valuable for them as a business owner to have people on their mailing list that they're not considering what's in it for the actual member of your list, what's in it for the audience. So get super clear. What is the value proposition of being on your mailing list? What exactly do people get from you? And why would your ideal client want to have that coming into their inbox on the regular? Take some time to jot down who is it that you specifically want to attract and why. Step number 2 is make sure that you are sending an email to your mailing list at least weekly, and make that a non-negotiable part of your business strategy. You need to look after your existing mailing list in order to attract more people to it. The fastest way to dry up mailing list growth is to neglect your mailing list. What is the point of attracting people to a mailing list when you don't actually email them? And in a lot of cases, the reason why people aren't mailing their list consistently is that they haven't sold themselves on that value proposition, which loops us back to that step 1. If you don't deeply and inherently believe that it's valuable for people to be on your mailing list, then how on earth are you supposed to attract people to it? And if you don't deeply and inherently believe that being on your mailing list is valuable, you won't email them. So this is where we've got to get really clear on those foundations and make that commitment. You are going to email your list every single week because you have value to share with them. Steps 1 and 2 can be done in a matter of hours. Just spending some time clarifying who and why and getting that first email out to your mailing list and making that commitment that you're going to email them weekly is very simple and straightforward to take care of. Now it's time for us to get into the deeper work. How do you attract 100 new people to that list? Well, step number 3 is to create a lead magnet or update an existing one with super high value proposition, something spectacular. Now, when I say something spectacular, I don't mean something long-winded. You need to be able to create it really quickly, and your audience need to be able to consume it and implement it really quickly as well. So think instead about something that would be valuable for your audience to have accomplished, something that would be valuable for them to put in place, something that would be valuable for them to have achieved. And can you create a short and sharp free resource that helps them to achieve that outcome? The 3 principles that I apply to lead magnet creation are generous, narrow, and precise. So I'm generous in what I help people to achieve for free. I'm narrow in the target market or audience that I create it for. And I'm precise in the way that I give the instruction and the specific strategy that I'm teaching or getting people to implement. So I'm not wasting people's time. I'm not being really broad. I'm being very narrow in who it's for, but I'm also not being stingy with what I give away for free. But there's a big difference between giving away for free 10 hours of long-winded content that kind of goes nowhere versus being generous with a 45-minute training that gets precise and specific results for people. Be generous, be narrow, and be precise. So that will take you about a week. If we think about creating it, setting up the opt-in, setting up the email to deliver that free resource, I'm going to give you a good, generous amount of time to get that done. So let's say it takes you a week. We've now got 3 weeks left to get 100 people signed up for that new or updated lead magnet. Well, the first thing we want to do is launch it to your warmest audiences for its first week of launch. So that involves things like sending it out to your existing email list. You might think, well, that's a waste because it's not actually going to grow my mailing list if I'm sending it out to existing people. But by the contrary, people from your existing mailing list are A, the most likely to sign up for it, B, the most likely to share it and tell their friends about it, C, the most likely to engage in content that you share on social media talking about it and saying how valuable it was, and D, the most likely to reply to the emails that go with it and let you know if it's missing something, if something was particularly valuable, and engage with you in that free resource. So start by sending it out to your existing mailing list. Then I would recommend doing a yes ladder on your own socials. So that's doing a post on your Instagram or your Facebook where you say, I've built a brand new free resource. It will help you to outcome. If you want it, let me know. And people comment in order for you to then give them the information as to how they can sign up for that free resource. Whenever I launch a new free resource, I try and launch it with a yes ladder because it gets my warmest audience engaging on my socials, but it also ensures that that post gets plenty of reach as well. And then reaching out to 50 to 100 people one at a time to offer them that free resource because you know it would be valuable to them. Now, I'm not saying to cold message strangers, slide into anyone's DMs who doesn't know you. What I'm saying is that you could probably, in your mind, come up with a list of 50 people right now who you have an existing relationship with, who you've spoken to before, existing clients, people you've spoken to about working together before, people you've been in masterminds with, people you've been in programs with and you've interacted, people you've helped before. I'm sure every single person listening to this podcast, if they really put their mind to it, could come up with a list of 50 people that may be interested in this free resource. And so reaching out to those people one-on-one and saying, hey, I've just put together a new free resource. It helps people to outcome, and I thought you might find it helpful. Do you want me to send it to you? By doing so, you're actually, number one, validating that your free resource is something that is valuable to people and that people agree that the outcome you have focused on in your free resource is something that people want to achieve. But number two, it's also recruiting people to your mailing list one at a time. And that is one of the most powerful and effective ways that you can grow your mailing list, especially with a new free resource. So there are 3 strategies to launch to your warm audience, and I would recommend that's your first week of the launch of this free resource. So that's week 2 of our little project. In week 3 of our project, we're going to do an organic launch on social media and on your website if you have one. So we're going to do a post every second day on your social media and in the Facebook groups that you belong to where you can promote a free resource every day for week 2 of your launch. Now, we're also in that process going to be looking at using lots and lots of different ways to describe your opt-in, different promo strategies, and different focal points. So you're using different copy and different imagery for every single post. This is your opportunity to test your messaging as to how effectively you can speak to the value of this free resource and being on your mailing list. You can test the conversion rate of your sign-up page for your new opt-in. Make sure that you're getting a good portion of those people who come over to check it out actually signing up. Anything above a 50% conversion rate for an opt-in page is pretty good these days. And it also gives you an opportunity to convert visitors to your website into people on your mailing list as well. So you could feature this new freebie on the homepage of your website. You could also feature this new freebie in your latest podcast episodes or blog posts or whatever feature content you might be releasing on a regular basis. Find all the different spaces on your website where it would be worthwhile to mention this free resource and take the time to install it into those spaces on your website. Now that's 3 weeks of focusing on growing your mailing list. We've spent a week in the creation and setup, a week promoting it to your warmest audience first, a week doing an organic launch on socials and making sure it's embedded and mentioned on your website wherever possible. And we have 1 week left. With that final week, my recommendation would be to boost your best performing post on your primary social platform to your warmest audience. So, is Facebook your primary social platform or is Instagram? The way you optimize for each is very different. You want to make sure that you're really clear on what your primary social platform is and boost your warmest audience there. Now, you could spend $100 to $200 boosting this to your existing audience, just using the boost post function to people who like your page or have engaged with your page in the last 365 days. Any of those warm audiences would be fine. And after a couple of days, if you want to then boost it to a colder audience and expand the reach of that ad, you can absolutely do that as well. But the first 100 people to sign up to a new opt-in are generally people who already know you in some way or are connected to you in some way. So have a play around with some different ways to boost your post and see how quickly those new leads start flowing in to your mailing list. Now, as I said at the start of this podcast episode, there are hundreds and hundreds of ways to grow your mailing list. And this is just one strategy that you could roll out over 4 weeks to get 100 people on your mailing list in that period of time. It does require that you get those foundations clear. And for some people, you might get yourself a little tripped up here and there on some of the strategies. But progress over perfection is the name of the game. And if you haven't been growing your mailing list consistently, why not give it a try? Now, if you're an absolute newbie to mailing list growth and you want to ensure that you are growing your audience in a meaningful and effective way, I've got a great free resource for you. It's called Grow Your Audience, and it's a 45-minute training that walks you step by step through the 4 phases of list growth and audience growth in general. Make sure you come and grab the link to that with the show notes of today's episode over at tashcorbin.com/450. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Heart Centered Business Podcast. And until next time, I cannot wait to see you shine. Bye for now.